where careers go to die.
Well, hello.
There's something to be said for well-run organizations.
Yes.
There just is. There's a reason the Jets haven't been to the playoffs in a while, and then neither have the Dolphins. And the Browns, for that matter. I mean, they've been toiling in...
Good evening.
Evening.
They've been toiling in...
Right.
I wish I knew the number off the top of my head. I should have. I should know it.
Oh, yeah?
The number of quarterbacks that the Browns have gone through
28 or so?
since it's a lot.
It's like 28.
Now I can hear you.
And they drafted a bunch of them in the first round. Hello, Cheryl and Benton and Susie and Len. That's fixed. The camera on the star of the show, eh?
Yep.
And Johnny enjoys.
Johnny enjoys. Yes, but I said hi to you on Zoom, but I guess I'll say it hi on YouTube as well.
I didn't hear. Y'all didn't have your microphone on.
Oh, okay. Like I'm muted over there.
We're doing those tonight.
Awesome. All right. I think that's in my pencil. And you wanted to do Anus 6, right?
Yep, he did.
Okay, good. Just making sure. That's what we'll start with, maybe.
I didn't do anything about it except read it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. The weather's getting cooler.
Perfect.
It's very nice. Weather.
It's been weird. I don't like to talk about the weather when it's good because I'm afraid it'll go away.
Yeah.
Because it was like an awesome end of September with really nice weather, and October's been nice, and I just keep thinking
Some point it's got to end.
it's going to turn into summer again any moment, because that's what Arkansas does, is turn back into summer before winter comes.
Yeah, I heard it was going to this year.
Yeah, it might. I think I can still remember. Maybe this was last year, and it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas. I think it might have been Christmas. It was like 72 degrees outside.
Yeah, it was a hot
on
Christmas.
Christmas last year. And I remember because usually, we play football. Well, my family, when we get together, we play football, us and the cousins and the uncles. And like, I remember people having to shed like the Christmas sweaters and everything else and just be running around in like, t-shirts because it was so warm.
Yeah, this past year, Thanksgiving was a really hard rain
Mm-hmm.
all day long, and it was really, really cold.
Mhm.
And then for Christmas, it was hot, and
Yeah.
there's opposites.
It's weird. It didn't snow either, at least.
It's not supposed to snow this year either because of El Nino.
Oh, I don't know what that is, but it sounds.
It's similar to El Nino, but it's different.
Oh, yes, that explains it. Thank you.
Well, what's going to happen is in our area, it will be a mild winter, and then north of us, it will be an extremely cold winter with lots of snow. So the northern areas are supposed to get heavy snows and cold winters, but we're not. It's something to do with like the water being
Gotcha.
different from the equator or something that flows up toward us or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Gotcha. Neat.
See, with El Nino, we had colder winters, I believe.
Gotcha. Yep. We'll give it a few more minutes here, like we usually do, just to see if there's any stragglers. We have, what's a nice way of putting this? Very few people on Zoom right now, as opposed to contrary. I see that we've averaging pretty good over here on YouTube, so maybe some of the Zoom stragglers will show up, but otherwise, we'll just get started without them. When they come in, we'll,
I don't know if anybody's mentioned Jimmy isn't going to be here.
Mhm.
He's in the hospital with Jason.
right.
Jimmy's in the hospital.
Yeah, getting his shunt redone.
hmm
What's going on?
He's getting what redone? So that can you say a little louder?
His shunt.
Shunt.
It's a thing that drains the fluid off of his
Mhm.
brain. I think
So-
Jimmy, it drains it from his brain and into his stomach.
Yeah.
And Jason's getting
So-
redone.
I I messaged him earlier. They did, and I have it in the announcements that I
Mhm.
emailed to Holt.
Yeah. I have it.
Yeah, they were able to drain the cyst that he had in his stomach or belly, as
Mhm.
Jimmy put it, and then they're looking at the shunt revision. He doesn't know when they're going to do that,
Gotcha.
but they were able to drain the fluid off of the cyst.
That's a lot.
Trixie. All right. Well, I guess we can get started then. If anybody else shows up, that'll be great, and we'll be thankful for that. But this is a pretty nice beginning we can have right now. We've been talking about some of the minor prophets and kind of just spending some time in them and going through them. And I think it's been a really nice experience to kind of read through them and study them and realize that they're still important and still definitely hold weight for us today. So that's been really beneficial. And I realized last week, as I was, I said you could look at Obadiah because that's the next one that follows, and I realized that Obadiah is one chapter and that it is only like 21 verses long, and that most of the 21 verses are very specifically dealing with the kingdom of Eden, which isn't very helpful. So at least for now, right now, you're off the hook for having to provide, what's interesting from Obadiah, because, let me tell you, Obadiah is a little bit tricksy being that short. And so instead, we're going to go back to Amos, and we're going to go back, reverse just a little bit, and go back to Amos chapter 6, because I think this is a really important section to read about. I think it could be very helpful when dealing with some attitudes and some thoughts about how we live, or rather how we behave. So maybe you can find something interesting here. So starting in verse 1, it says, "Woe to those who are at ease in Zion, and to those who feel secure on the mountain of Samaria. The notable men of the first of the nations, to whom the house of Israel come. Pass over to Calma and see, and from there go to Hamath the Great, and then go down to Gath of the Philistines. Are you better than these kingdoms? Or is their territory greater than your territory? O you who put far away the day of disaster and bring near the seat of violence, woe to those who lie on beds of ivory and stretch themselves out on their couches and eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall, who sing songs to the sound of the harp and, like David, invent for themselves instruments of music, who drink wine in bowls and anoint themselves with the finest of oils, but who are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph. So I read, quite a bit there of Amos chapter 6. But, I have a question here. Who is God saying woe to, right? If you had to essentially come up with some other adjectives for the type of people that Amos is talking about here, what paint the picture of these people that Amos is describing. What's he talking to? Who's he prophesying against right now?
The type of people, let's say, self-confidence and more interested in entertainment and luxury than anything else.
Self-confident, those who are more interested in entertainment and luxury than anything else. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else got anything to add to that? Kind of paint this picture of these people, what they were doing.
They just live very comfortable lifestyle. They don't have a lot of struggles in life. Everything's coming easy to them.
Yeah. I think that those are both good. I think they're the overwhelming kind of idea of these people that's being described here. But I think there's one kind of crucial point that's missing here.
They're the rulers. They're the ones in charge.
I think, I that's getting closer to it, right? But it may be a little bit harder because you may not necessarily know the context of some of the words, right? But think a little bit more. I'm trying to encourage critical thinking here. There's something else that I'm reaching for here, and I may just end up having to say it because I may be asking questions nobody can know the answer to. Okay, maybe I'll ask this, and this might lead us to it. What is special about Zion and Samaria, the mountain of Samaria? What are special about those two things?
Places where they go to worship.
In Israel and Judah.
Absolutely. The places where they go to worship. The temple, the temple is found at the Mount of Zion. That's what they call the Temple Mount there in Jerusalem. It's what Judah, the people of Judah, worshipped at. And then in Samaria, there was a mountain. Now, you may be getting it confused with the New Testament Samaria, where there was another temple on the mountain of Samaria, and that is eventually going to happen. But at this point, that's not what it is. There is no temple to God in Samaria at this point in time for Israel. Instead, one of the first kings of Israel, when the kingdom separated, said to himself, he's like, whoa, we still have a bunch of Jews living in the northern kingdom, and they're supposed to go worship at the temple in Jerusalem. So how are we going to solve this issue? Because I don't want them leaving my country and realizing that Judah's better. And so instead, he built two altars, one in the very north of the kingdom of Israel and one in Samaria on a mountain. Essentially, he built bulls, golden bulls. It's very similar to the golden calf story. It's very eerily similar, where the people of Israel could go and worship there in Samaria, and they'd worship these golden bulls. And that's what's special is in this passage. I think, of course, we are right to see that these people are content. They're only concerned about luxury. They're only concerned about what is good and having fun and their positions of power. But by mentioning that it's the people at Zion and the people at Samaria. What Amos is trying to say is that the people he's addressing are people who only have that confidence because they think that they deserve it because they worship God. Because they worship their God, whoever it is. So the people in Judah, they think they're better than everybody else. They think they can relax and rest and, have fun. They think they can focus on the luxuries and focus on drinking wine and dancing and, singing with the harps and relaxing like David. And they think that not necessarily because they worship at the temple, but just because they have the temple. And the people in Israel have that same attitude, but they're justified in their actions because they have the temple there on the mountain in Samaria. And I think that's the aspect that we missed here, is that these people think they are justified because of the place of worship or who they think they're worshiping, which adds this new level of behavioral, what's the word I'm searching for here?
Self-righteous.
New level of self-righteousness. These people, they don't necessarily worship at the temple. They don't really care about following the precepts of God or following the principles of God. They are justified just because there is a temple there. Now, is there any way that attitude is applied today? Is there any way that kind of behavior is seen today? And what does that look like?
And I think it's seen in a lot of different ways. Just from whatever an individual thinks makes them better than somebody else. I mean, as far as church goes, it's an application would be people who think they're better than others just because they go to church.
Mm-hmm.
I used to hear also a lot that people think that just because they go to church and they repent at that moment, that they're okay. They don't do anything which would make them complacent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're hitting it right on the nail right on the head. Let's not mix metaphors here, Holton. Yeah, I think that point is definitely true. Verse 1 is just so striking to me. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion. These are people who are surrounded by the halls of their temple, and they think that alone brings them comfort, that alone makes them deserving of luxury, that alone means they can ignore the problems of the world around them. There's a quote that I knew at one point. I don't really know it anymore. Something about how when you live up on a mountaintop and you look at the world around you, from the mountaintop, all the world's problems seem small in comparison. Something like that. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure. But the idea I think that there's being conveyed here is that these are people of God who, as we've seen from earlier in Amos, there are people on the street who are struggling to get by, who are being cheated out of their money. There are people that are being taken advantage of. There are people that are being essentially, forced into prostitution for these temples of other gods there in Jerusalem. But there is a group of people who look around and they say, well, I'm in the temple. So Judah is good. Judah is good because there's nothing wrong here in the temple. I don't have to listen to the screams of the people who are being abused and taken advantage of outside the temple walls because everything's nice and peaceful within the temple. I mean, look at these ivory walls. Look how nice these are. You know what? Maybe we should clean these ivory walls. You know, we just got a large donation from so-and-so. And so I think with this money, what would really benefit us is to, clean the walls. They're getting a little dirty. Man, these curtains, they're nice, but they're about 5 years old. And that's getting a little old for us at the temple because everything's nice here. We're all about the luxuries here within the temple walls. You know, who cares that there is a poor class that is starving to death out on the streets? I mean, we pass them on the way, but as long as we keep our eyes focused on the temple, their problems don't exist, right? And Steve says, and I think this is absolutely true, climb the mountain so you can see the world, not so the world can see you. Yeah, maybe that's a quote. I don't know. But it's very nice. Judah's and the people of Judah, some of them were surprised when many of them were surprised when the prophets came and said, "Hey, you guys need to shape up. You guys need to get your lives together. You need to start working and being better." And they were surprised. And they said, "What? Why would God be sending prophets to us? We're good. We're really good. We go to the temple. I mean, I make my annual donation to the temple. I made sure that the temple served us the sacrificial meat on golden platters instead of silver platters. We're really good." All the while ignoring the absolute chaos of the world around them. I say all this to say that when you look at the modern day parallels, it can frightening because we can find ourselves locked in our churches and we sit in church and we participate in church and we look around and we say, everything's going pretty good. We're all having fun. We're banded together. We're a family. We are the church. We are believers working in unison for God. But let's ignore the problems that are going outside the church because, it's only what's inside the walls that matter, right? And so that type of thinking breeds the thinking that has developed here in Amos chapter 6. Anybody got anything to say to this? Anything to add or comments to say?
I don't think the people were necessarily doing, I don't think they were actively, how do I put that? It's not like they're like, "Oh, look at all this stuff." Well, they're not making a conscious choice. They're just not, the activities of their life don't lead them to even notice
right, exactly.
the things that are going on. It's not
they're not
blatant
doing it. They're not doing it out of a sense of
spite or anger.
Spite or like, well, the poor deserve it.
Yeah,
that's not why we're doing it. It's like they walk in and they don't even see the poor person on their way to the temple,
and they will attribute their ease and their wealth as evidence of God's blessing.
Yes,
it's obvious that God's with us.
Mhm.
Look at all we have. So I must be really good.
right.
And the only reason you're not really good like me, really well off, is because obviously it's because you're not as close to God as I am.
Right, right.
And it becomes their measuring stick.
Absolutely.
God.
Yeah. And then a whole bunch of prophets came around and were like, no, that's not it whatsoever. In fact, the only reason you actually have anything at all is you were supposed to be using your wealth, supposed to be using your blessing to help those who did not have.
Right.
And so for this, Okay, or we're going to do something crazy. Okay, we're going to move beyond scripture into the world of application. Okay, so let's put our thinking caps on and let's think. How do we avoid this? How do we change this? How do we do better at this? Because I think this is a problem that I don't want to say that it's so pervasive that it's something everyone struggles with, or that every church deals with, or something like that. But I think there are moments in time where we find ourselves like the Judeans, right? Moments. And sometimes those moments may stretch into, habits or things like that. But I think every one of us can say there have been moments where we have been content wrongly. So think of, I'm looking for specific applications of what we can do in those situations to not be this, or to try to get better at not being so content in our lives that we blindly go about it without noticing what actually could be changed.
I'm going to be a little more harsh than you. I'm going to say that if we live in America, this is something that we probably have to deal with every day. Like,
Okay.
I don't think that's too much to put on us. I think you're.
I wanted to be nice, but I also really do believe that we all do this pretty much all the time.
It's easy, and you can. I mean, it's just easy to feel comfortable. Like,
yeah,
I think it's part of our.
And I think that what happens is, and I'll be quiet here in a minute so that people can actually answer. I promise. But I think what happens is that we get these. There's some psychological word for it, where confirmation bias, I think it might be the term for it, where we look around and we basically do what the Jews did here, where they were like, well, we're in a good place because God is with us. And so, for example, you're driving down the street. You see someone walking down the street with a sign in one hand and a bottle of whiskey in another, and they say, alcoholic, need money, help, right? And I know I have caught myself thinking before, well, of course you need money. Look at the position that you put yourself in, right? Of course that you're desperate because you did something that was not right. I don't know their life circumstance. I don't know anything about it. And sometimes, most of the time, right, they don't even have a bottle of alcohol in their hand. They're just holding a sign that says need help. And I immediately begin to form implications of that, or think to myself, well, they're probably just going to go spend any money I give them on the liquor store, or they're going to go spend it on cigarettes, or I think to myself, well, they probably did something bad, and that's the reason why they're in this position. And so that type of thinking, you find yourself just doing it without a conscious thought, and you're just like, well, for some reason, they deserve to be in the position they're in, so I'm just going to drive on past. So yes, I do agree that living in the place that we live in a place of relatively high material wealth, we can do that a lot. Being at ease, yes, we can do that a lot. So back to the original. What are some specific? Now, when I say specific, it might be easy to say things like, well, we should follow the biblical principle of, yes, I agree. We should follow the biblical principle. So how does that biblical principle play out in real life? That's what I say when I'm looking for specific examples of things we could do to help these situations and to help this mindset that we find ourselves in. Anybody want to share one?
One of the things is to seek out those in need.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't even have to seek out people that say, you should call.
Mm-hmm.
somebody that you know is in a rough situation, get in contact with them. You know, just but also seeking out those in need. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities of donating money, and there's all kinds of charities to donate to. Donating your time.
Yeah, I think it boils down to just helping others, you know.
Yeah.
I
Helping
know
others.
in my situation, you know, if it wouldn't have been for Dana, you know, Dana fought for me. You know, it means a lot.
Yeah. Talking about this specifically, you know, just putting yourself out there to be available to help others, right? Whether that's, you know, the first step is approaching them and asking. I think there is a fear, or there can be a fear of, what if they ask me to do too much? Or what if they ask me to do something that is beyond my means? Or maybe they ask me to do something that I can't do, right? But my philosophy in situations like that is like, first off, you'll never know unless you just ask them, right? If you let fear or of whatever run your lives, then you're not ever gonna go anywhere, and you're gonna end up in a worse spot than you started in. But I also think that in situations like that, you are underestimating the character of your fellow human being. I think that. What? Go on, Lynn. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up. Is if we're just talking about the church, ourselves, just our church, there are probably many, many people serving in all sorts of capacity that we have absolutely no idea of what they're doing.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm not trying to embarrass Dana, but he is a servant. And we know that he's a servant. Because if we've got a problem, we call Dana. Because we know Dana will take care of it. Right? He, we have the Joseph Storehouse. And if he's able, he's there working. He will do whatever he can to work there. And then you add on all the other people that work for that. But there needs to be more people doing that, because, you know, there's just a few that do that out of a whole congregation. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. And
we have opportunities all around us, but that would require for us to pray about the opportunities and for God to open our eyes to those opportunities, because he will provide those opportunities. You know, the reason we can say to Dana, you know, say that Dana is a servant is because he has opened himself for that. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's 100% true. I think there could be a combination of things. I think we should do a better job of recognizing people that are in doing acts of service. And then this is something as well. I think we need to learn that just because someone is doing service differently from myself doesn't mean that their service is any less important to God. Even if, for example, you're putting in 2 hours of work and the other person is putting in 15 minutes of work, or you're putting in 8 hours of work and the other person is putting in, you know, fill in the blank, right? Even though it may not seem like service in your eyes, in the people that person is helping, it is, that serving God looks different in people. And that the way that I do service may be radically different from the way you do service, but it doesn't make me any less Christian. It doesn't make me any less of a disciple to do it. And more so, I would even go so far as to say that maybe, just maybe, we could learn to practice the service of other people. So that sometimes we put ourselves in others' shoes and we say, okay, what if I did what Dana did for a week? Or what if I did what Holton did for a week? Or what if I did what Joyce did for a week? Or, fill in the blank. And I think we would learn very quickly that at the end of the day, we're all trying to serve God. And I think it would reduce perhaps some of the discontent, or I don't know what word I'm looking for here.
Resentment, I think, is a good one.
Resentment.
Yeah, I've seen people do that, talk about, well, so-and-so is not involved with, X ministry, whatever. But, you don't necessarily know what else they might be doing.
Right.
A collection, for instance, I've counted collection quite a few times, and there are people that give way more than I can.
Yeah.
And if they didn't spend that time working at their jobs, that they can't spend in service because they have a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't have that money to give. Like just things like that.
Yeah.
Holton, another thing too, that I've learned is if I can put myself in somebody else's place,
Mm-hmm.
I can understand more. I've learned more. Being up here, what a phone call means today.
Mm-hmm.
I never realized that.
Yeah.
So that's what when I get dissatisfied in different things today, I just try to put myself in somebody else's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me.
I think it's kind of cheesy.
Action,
I know, but we in our many times in the Jewish culture, they had some form of a festival or ritual of some sort that they were required to do once a year, that was there to try to help them focus on a certain aspect about God in some way, or to remember something God did for them, or what have you. Now, they didn't always participate in those things in the way they should, so they lost some of their meaning because they didn't do it the way God asked them to.
Right.
They were just going through the motions. But in our own culture, we have New Year's resolution. Is something that's part of our own culture that it's not even a religious thing, really. It's just a thing that is done by.
It's just the great annual lie.
Yeah, the great annual lie. Well, but the idea is that you choose something that's gonna
to be better
at, and to notice your shortcomings or your areas of you need growth, or ways to challenge and move yourself out of your comfort zone. And I think that's really what's needed. Complacency is, I don't think about the fact that I'm comfortable.
Right.
I'm there, and I'm not even aware. If I was aware, then it would be different. But I'm not even aware. I'm complacent. That means I'm not even thinking about moving out of my comfort because I'm comfortable. I think if there's something that jogs, Christmas time, there, we often think of, and Thanksgiving, we often think of things like this. I think we have in our culture times in which, if we use them properly, they would help us be better at not being complacent and help us get out of our comfort and make us recognize areas in which we could get out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. Because I think comfort breeds contentment, and contentment breeds stagnation.
Yes.
And stagnation brings the death of the church, is really what it is. Just like it brought the death of Israel. Contentment and stagnation eventually brought about the exile and destruction of both Israel and Judah.
I mean, even what we're doing today, I mean, that's what Bible classes are for, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're supposed to meet together, is to encourage each other to be better, to prod each other on, to help each other remember. Like, if we do things that God provides for us the right way, I think it helps us avoid there's things put in place that will help us not be complacent if we do them. If we do them the way God would like us to do them.
That's a key point. Do them like God wants us to do.
Instead of being like Israel and starting to go through the motions of those things, instead of letting them prod us.
I think one thing that could help that is if we learned, and this is all of us, we had this discussion last week, if we learn that sometimes it's okay to address differences and that it's okay to talk about those differences and deal with them head on. And maybe you want to use a different word than differences. Maybe you wanted to use a word like constructive criticism, or differences of opinions, or the way things are done. If we learn to deal with people and, instead of talking about them behind their back or what they did, and started learning how to face people head on, I think that could solve a lot of problems. I mean, Peter and Paul did in the letters. We have it written that Peter was apparently doing something that Paul had to address, and he had to go to him, right? Jesus lays out this format of how we're supposed to go and address a person first. If we have something that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on, go and address that person first. And in that way as well, you actually get a healthier, dynamics that exist in place that could just be a benefit to all, I think. So I guess, we got a little bit off topic, but Amos 6 is pretty good.
I think we got off topic.
No, I think it's very on topic. I just think we spent a lot of time in Amos 6, which is very good, I think. So next week, I'm just going to say start looking in Jonah. I'll give a little summary of Obadiah to start us off, so you don't have to, necessarily go through Obadiah. But for Jonah, go through chapters 1 and 2. Skim it, flip through it, read it all, pick one of them, and try to find some interesting things in Jonah 1 and 2. I think we're going to split Jonah up into 2 sections at least, just because of how some of the ideas in Jonah are so important. But we're going to talk about that. And then, you mentioned cheesy and, trying to do better and make resolutions or things we can do. So I'm going to try to create an actionable call. Some might call it homework. Some might call it something else. But I think for the next week, one thing that could be really good, I know Frank mentioned this, is phone calls, right? Phone calls being an act of service. I think that's true. But I'm going to go a step further here, because I think, we're trying to get out of our comfort zone here. And I think there are some people here, I'd say even most people here, that do a great job about phone calls. So I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to say, why don't this week you give a phone call to someone you wouldn't usually call, or you wouldn't think to be first on the list to call, someone that you don't usually call, and encourage them. Find somebody in your contacts that you haven't called in a while, or that you just generally like to avoid because maybe they talk weird and that annoys you, or, whatever. Find someone in your phone list that you don't usually call, or that you don't necessarily want to call, and call them and encourage them.
You're going to get a lot of phone calls this week.
What can I say? I'm very pleasant to be around. But I'll do that as well. And next week, actually, we can begin next week with talking about that. And hopefully some people do it. I'll do it, and I'll share my story. And hopefully some other people do that as well. I think that's, we don't want to be like Judah. We don't want to be like Israel, right? We want to get out of our comfort zone. We want to get out of this contentment. So I think that's something we can do this week. And I think that's something I'm going to start trying to do going forward, is making a very specific thing that we can do, because it ended very poorly for Judah and Israel, and we definitely don't want it to end very poorly for our church. All right, announcements. I'm gonna read through the announcements. If there's anything on YouTube, you can be typing it, and I'll read it off once I get through the announcements. If anybody on Zoom has an announcement, kind of wait until I'm done, and then I'll give an opportunity to speak up, or forever hold your peace. So upcoming events, Sunday, November 1st is $1 a month for Southern Christian Home. Joseph Storehouse items needed this week are peanut butter or canned chicken or tuna. Pantry is open every Wednesday at 9 a.m. till noon or until we run out. This week we were able to serve 28 families in less than 45 minutes after opening. So it was zipping today then. Went quick, absolutely. But I mean, just it's very nice to read every week that we're serving like 26 to 28 families that need food. I mean, that's service. I definitely think so.
Praying with all of them.
Absolutely, praying with all of them and just spending time getting to know them. Absolutely, that's awesome. We want to remember in prayer Jason Allen. We kind of mentioned him at the beginning. But he is in UAMS, where he had a liter of fluid drained from a cyst in his stomach. But he's doing good. He's going to be evaluated for a shunt revision, and it will likely be needed. They're not quite sure how many days he's going to have to spend in the hospital, so we want to pray for him and his family. Luckily, Jimmy is being allowed to stay with Jason at the hospital, which I know, is a very big concern with COVID and everything else. So it's good that was able to happen. Laquita Reed has asked that we remember her in a specific prayer. She's having heart surgery to replace her aortic valve, but there is this procedure that is this special procedure where they can replace it without her having open heart surgery. And so she will have a heart cath on October 27th. So we want to pray that she's a good candidate for that so that she won't have to deal with open heart surgery. Carol McCormick had corneal surgery yesterday. She has to return tomorrow to Little Rock, where they will do another procedure. She will be staying with her daughter and son-in-law, Cheryl and Randy Baker, as she recovers from the surgery. Dean and Lynn Purcell, Sharon Payne's brother and sister-in-law, have COVID. Dean has been admitted to the hospital, so we definitely want to remember them in prayer. And Maria Barrios, Oscar's wife, will have a small operation this Friday the 16th, where they will go in with a camera to try and locate her cancer. So we want to pray that they're able to find it and able to treat it. Kathy King is feeling much better after being sick on Sunday with stomach issues. Linda Appleby safely arrived to her new home in Florida. We want to pray for her as she begins her new job and gets situated there. We want to remember Kennedy, Oscar Barrios' granddaughter, because Kennedy's mother passed away Saturday due to suicide. So we want to remember her and her siblings and that family in our prayers. And we want to extend our love and sympathy to the family of Eileen Smiley, Carol McCormick's sister-in-law, who passed away last Wednesday. Visitation was this evening from 6 to 8, and funeral services will be tomorrow at 2 at Roller McNutt. Are there any other prayer requests?
Halton, I have one.
Yeah.
Fine. My sister called me the first of the week
Uh-huh.
from Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
And her son, my nephew, his wife, Christine Myers,
Okay.
is in intensive care in the hospital up there. She's having renal failure and just a lot of things.
Gotcha.
I thought she had COVID,
Yeah.
the COVID section. But I told my sister Joan that I would ask the church to pray for her.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, my nephew was supposed to come down and give me a week from Friday, and I'm going to go up there a couple of weeks and stay.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else will probably have to come get me.
All right.
They're coming down. But anyway, if we could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, prayers for Christine Myers. She's in the hospital with some issues, health issues, and she asked for our prayers. That's Frank's nephew's wife, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So we want to remember her in our prayers as well. Is there anything else? All right. Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this day and thank you for your many blessings, Lord. Lord, help us to not be complacent. Help us not to be content and just enjoying our lives up in our ivory palaces, Lord, but instead help us to use church as an opportunity to reassess, re-equip, and be better able to go out in the world and serve you and be your disciples in this world, Lord. So we ask for that, Lord. Lord, I also ask that you be with those on our prayer list. I don't usually read out the names, but tonight I will, just to try to, continue to be with them. So we ask that you be with Jason Allen as he's in hospital with his issues, Lord, and just help that to go smoothly and recovery to be quick, and that they don't have to spend a ton of time in the hospital. We ask that you be with Laquita Reed as she is striving to be a candidate for this procedure that will require her to not have open heart surgery, Lord. And so we ask that she is a good candidate for that, and that everything in the process go as smoothly as possible, Lord, and that she is able to have this done as quick as possible. Lord, we ask that you be with Carol McCormick as she had cornea surgery yesterday. Help her recovery to be swift and help it to have fixed the problems that were existing there, and help her to be able to return as soon as she can to her own home. We ask that you be with Dean and Lynn Purcell. COVID is this overwhelming issue that has just kind of swept through the entire world, Lord, and it affects those who are older or that have pre-existing conditions, especially, Lord. And it's never a good sign when someone has to enter the hospital due to it. And so we please pray that situation not be as serious as it seems, and that recovery is swift from that as well. We ask that you be with Maria Barrios as she is going to have a procedure on the 16th, and that they will be able to locate her cancer, that there will be something that is able to be treated, that it will be done so quickly. We ask that you be with, or we want to say a prayer of thanks for Kathy King, that she's feeling much better, and that she will be rid of those whatever sickness or whatever problems were ailing her this past Sunday, and that she will be able to rejoin us, and that we'll be able to see her smile again. We ask that you be with Linda Appleby as she has safely arrived at her new home in Florida. We want to pray that her job down there is good, and that it is what you want her to be in. We want to ask that you be with Kennedy, who is dealing with the loss of her mother, Lord. Just be with that family, as it's so tough dealing with death. We also want to extend those same prayers to the family of Eileen Smiley, who is struggling as well. We also ask that you be with Frank's nephew's wife, who is in the hospital dealing with problems, Lord, and help her stay not to be so extended, and that her problems to be sorted out swiftly and efficiently. Lord, we just ask that you be with all of those. And I'm sure there are more that are on our hearts and minds, family members or friends or ourselves that are dealing with issues, Lord, health or otherwise. And we just ask that you be with those and intervene in that. You're so powerful and so amazing, Lord. And we just ask that we feel that power, and we feel your grace and your mercy and your love in our lives, Lord. Help us to follow the example of Jesus in everything that we do. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. All right. Remember to call somebody you wouldn't usually call. Encourage them.
Happy birthday to Laura Tilley.
Oh, happy birthday, Laura.
Birthday. Bye, YouTube. I'm going to end the stream
Good night,
now.
everyone.
Good night.